6 Days in Fallujah is one hell of an early access title that's been gaining a lot of attention for its heavy subject matter. After 8 hours of playtime, I've compiled my first impressions and what the title has to offer so far. Will the $40 price tag be worth it, even while still in early access? Stick around and find out the answer. Upon starting up the game for the first time, you're met with tense music, newsreel footage, and interviews from soldiers who lived through the Battle of Fallujah. It becomes very clear that the game has some serious undertone to it, bringing the horror and tense atmosphere of this historical event into your room for you to experience, but with respect and maturity. Before jumping into my first match, I figured it would be a wise idea to tackle the training section. This puts you through a small house that you have to locate and shoot 10 still targets. The layout of the house is random each time, so don't be surprised if it looks a little bit different on your run-through. While this sets a great tone for the ambience and horror-esque atmosphere, the actual instructions are far too surface level. You will learn more by skimming through the controls menu than the actual training course. Once acquainted with the controls and with a slight taste of the level, I was ready to step foot into a firefight. Currently, only fireteam missions are available. Campaign and co-op are on the roadmap for their future updates, which I'll go over later in the video. There are 4 different types of fireteam missions in total currently in this stage of early access. They are as follows: clearing a landing zone for helicopters to land, flushing out an enemy stronghold, rescuing a wounded squad, and protecting a convoy. Each will have their own side objectives when playing. These missions are random, so you won't get to choose which one you're playing. Each of these fireteam missions have a cool cinematic that play before dropping you into the body of a soldier. Unfortunately for me, I started off on the hardest of the 4 missions, which was to protect the convoy. At first, I was unsure of whether we were supposed to push forward into the buildings or stick with the convoy. The lack of communication from my squad didn't really help. Neither did the fact that I had the wrong mic input selected at the time. After a few unforgiving failures, and armed with a functioning mic, I landed in a lobby with more experienced players. Once in a mission, it became apparent how immersive the radios were. The game has proximity chat, so your mic is just open to nearby squad mates when you're in the game. It also has reflective sound, so when you go into a house and talk, you'll hear your teammates differently as well as yourself. It's also been said that the AI will react to you talking and your teammates. However, I'm unsure if that feature has in fact been implemented just yet. However, when using the radio, which is a spacebar for some reason, it adds a radio filter over your voice. Unlike other games, it sounds like you're actually speaking through a comm radio. The first time you'll notice this is when you start off a mission and your squad mates will begin talking, as the person introducing the mission does as well. The jarring part is they can sound almost identical, where you can't tell which one is actually the person you should be listening to. After getting my bearings, it was time to enjoy the core gameplay, which shines on through. Kicking down doors, clearing rooms left and right, holding back enemies from entering a building, and just trying your best to survive. Your nerves are always on edge when opening a door or going around a dark corner of a building. Rooms will only be lit by a dim flashlight attached to your rifle or pistol, and if you're lucky, some sunlight shining through a window. Every moment feels like a fight for survival, and is tense with uncertainty. The only other title as of recent that has come close to this feeling is Ready or Not. But even in comparison, 6 Days in Fallujah turns the uneasy feeling up to 11. I then spent the next few hours of my playtime just enjoying the experience. The gameplay is satisfying, and there is still some variation between the levels. Each level is procedurally generated with only a few static objects, so it is different each time, at least layout-wise. There are multiple roles you'll be given when spawning in that you are randomly assigned. These roles give you different weapons, such as a shotgun if you're an assist class, an M249 if you're a fire role, an M16 with a grenade launcher if you're the team leader, or the ready role, which gives you an M16 and throwable frag grenades. When it comes to your soldier getting hit and injured, they have an interesting way of going through and handling the health. If you get shot at and you're possibly wounded or shell-shocked enough, the game will tell you to move back behind cover and to check yourself for a wound. You'll see your character pat himself down and check for any bullet holes. If he doesn't find anything, the screen will go back to normal and you can get back into the fight. Otherwise, if your character does find himself to be bleeding, then you'll go through and patch yourself up with a first aid kit. The other two unlucky circumstances are if you get shot and down, or incapacitated. This means that you can crawl and even sometimes walk still through different areas, but you have a timer that runs out. In this time, a teammate will have to run up to you and go through and patch you up. The rundown timer on the bleed out for incapacitation is pretty fast. So make sure if this happens to you, you're in close space of a teammate or you stick close to a battle buddy. If you're the unluckiest, like on some of the sniper levels where you have a sniper shooting it down at you from a tower that you're not allowed to shoot at due to rules of engagement, thanks Geneva Convention, sometimes you'll just get popped in the head and you'll be out. At that point, you'll have to sit and watch your teammates play through the level, which they can go back once reinforcements are available to an APC that's where you spawn at originally. From there, they'll be able to refill their weapons and call for reinforcements, which basically just opens the back of the APC and allows their squad mates that have died previously to respawn, which they will not always start with the same role that they did in the beginning of the match. Your saw gunner might now just have a shotgun. When it comes to the movement, you can vault over things and crouch down behind them, but there's no prone at the moment, which I understand, but it also seems kind of weird. Hopefully they implement that in the future. While the gameplay is fun and still enjoyable after playing the missions multiple times through, it does feel a little bit repetitive doing the same type of mission over and over. I spoke with players who picked up the game on the first day of release. They mentioned how a lot of their friends are waiting for another update before coming back to the title. There were, however, still plenty of people filling out the lobbies, even a month after the early access release. Now that we've talked about the gameplay and some of the mechanics, let's move on to the roadmap that the devs have for the future. For the first quarter of the release, which spans from July 2023 to September, they're planning on adding a nighttime mission alongside other times of day. Which, for the love of God, I hope they add night vision, since the flashlight feels barely serviceable as is. They will also add in different weather variants to affect how some of the missions are played out. I would imagine the weather effects being such as dust storms or even possibly rain. For the second quarter, which is October 2023 to December, they plan on adding AI teammates that you can command. At the moment, if you attempt to do a fire mission not in a lobby, you'll be by yourself, which if you're able to accomplish, good on you. A co-op mission will be added in that time as well, and additional variables for each mission. I am curious to see what the difference between a co-op mission is compared to a fireteam mission. Possibly just adding another squad in, but I'm just speculating. I also imagine more variables means more minor objectives during the gameplay. For the third quarter, which is January 2024 to March, they will release the first campaign mission. The way that they've handled the introduction in the beginning, almost as a history lesson, by showing interviews and found footage, putting you into the situations, or even just the environment, it's gonna be really cool how this is laid out. They will also be adding civilians into the co-op and campaign missions, only making it that much more stressful trying to identify hostile targets from civilians. During this time period, they also mentioned adding another additional co-op mission. For the fourth quarter, which will be April 2024 to June, they'll be adding special operator missions. Not much is really said about this, but I would imagine it being something along the lines of a sniper mission, EOD mission, or hostage rescue. They will also be adding in other coalition nationalities in the fight, and adding more missions for both co-op and campaign. While the end of this roadmap does not mean the full release of the title, it is nice to know that Highwire Games plans for the future, giving us something to look forward to, versus being left in the dark like some other devs love doing. And before we dive into the PC side, I just want to let all my console players know, breathe a sigh of relief. They will be releasing the title on PS4, PS5, Xbox One, and the Xbox Series X, as well as PC. The roadmap for the console release, however, is going to be June of next year, most likely because they want to work out the bugs on PC and then work on the optimization for the consoles. All the footage you have seen so far has been recorded on the PC with the following specs: an i7-6700K for a processor, 16 gigabytes of DDR4 RAM, an RTX 2080 Super, and the game is installed on my NVMe drive, which in total is only about 22 gigabytes worth of storage space that the game requires. And yes, I know my processor is 7 years old. However, I will be upgrading this winter and finally stop putting it off. The minimum requirements for the title are as follows. For a processor, a 7th generation i5 or a Ryzen 5 2600. And for a graphics card, a GTX 970 or an AMD Radeon R9 390 or an AMD 580. The recommended requirements are an i7-8700K or an AMD RX 5700 XT. For a graphics card, either an RTX 2070 or an AMD RX 5700 XT. Overall, this game I wouldn't say is heavily demanding, but man, it does look good. We're not talking about super details, you're seeing every little speck of dust, but it's realistic where it sets the mood properly. And I'd much rather they focus on the core mechanics than prettying everything up. For an indie studio, it's pretty good. One really cool fact that I just wanted to showcase is Highwire Games, which is making this, not only picked up this title that was dropped originally for being too controversial, the owner of Highwire Games is no other than Marty O'Donnell. Some of you might not know who that is, but let me give you a little refresher. That iconic Halo theme and all the music that's come from their series from anything before Halo 4, yeah, that's that guy. He's the owner of it. Not only is he doing audio and music, he's also kind of like a project lead. Overall, with the roadmap that is laid out, I believe a lot of minor gripes are going to be corrected already. But one glaring thing that I believe should be done, however, is adjusting the default field of view for the player. Because buildings with flashlights can feel insanely cramped at times, especially if your flashlight is on the end of a rifle and you're too close to a wall. It'll just face it towards the ground, now leaving you blind in the dark until you look at your feet. Now, thankfully there is an FOV slider, so the default is 77, the lowest you can go is 75, and the highest you can go is 100. You'll see the comparisons on your screen right now. And while initially outside, you might not notice a difference. However, as soon as we move everything inside, you'll start noticing a huge difference of spacing. The screen begins to feel a lot less cramped when the FOV is raised up a bit. This is the FOV number I think most people should be set on. It's a happy medium where you can see more of what's going on in the room, but also not make it to where you feel like you're playing Counter-Strike or Quake. Please, for the love of God, with the training, go over the controls more in depth. It's cool to get the basics down and like be able to kick in a door and turn on your flashlight, but there's so much that's left off in the training. Like before you get a huge amount of players influxing, that needs to be something that gets corrected. It's a cool like training exercise for checking corners and getting used to the flashlight, but you need to add other sections of changing fire rate, patching yourself when you're hurt, or even just reloading. Checking your magazine by slightly hitting R versus holding it down to fully reload the magazine or a shotgun. Like, that's a basic thing that's not gone over, at least that I didn't notice when playing through. And prone would be really cool to be done. Now to give you my opinion on whether it's worth the $40. If you're a diehard military sim fan and you see yourself enjoying the full title once every feature is released, I'd suggest picking this game up. In their early access quotes in Steam, they do go through and mention upping the price of the game once as more features are implemented. However, if you've never really played a military sim before, this might not be the first one you want to go through and do. It can be a little bit clunky. It's not like some of the other games where you can just run around the corner and be a bullet sponge. It's more difficult, I'd say, than your normal shooter, and you have to be more conscious as to what's going on, as well as communicate properly. If you want a good introduction to military sim, check out something like Insurgency Sandstorm, which will get your feet wet, or my personal favorite so far, and the one I always keep going back to, is Squad. But $40 for someone who's never played a military sim before, especially that's an early access, I would hold off on it. If you have the cash to spare, and it does seem like something you're interested in, go ahead, throw your money at it. But if you're trying to be more careful about what you purchase and spend your time doing, I would save that $40 until they're at least another 6 months in development. Thank you guys for taking the time to check out the video. If you could share it with a friend that might be interested in the title, I would greatly appreciate it. And if you've already picked it up, comment down below what you think so far. I love having conversations about the games and seeing what you guys think, or maybe details I even missed. Until next time, guys, I'm AJ from Those Awkward Gamers, and I'll meet you on the battlefield.